Well, hello. Good to see you. My name is Nicholas, and I had a pleasure of sharing kind of week 5 of our Thunderdome series, where we tried to tackle like the tension and the conflict that exists between science and faith. And without question, this was one of the messages that I felt my own inner conflict trying to talk about, because it's such a difficult topic. And for many of us, we have like these emotional connections, spiritual connections, even to our opinions. And so it's pretty easy for anything that's said to kind of light a fire or trigger us, set us off, and get us distracted and thinking about something else, which really was something that I was trying to avoid. So I just want to remind you that the goal of this series and of this message was to try to help us process difficult topics. So if it felt difficult, that really was kind of part of the plan going into it. I want to share just a couple more thoughts that I think might help for people who maybe feel like they're more on one side or the other of this conversation, more on the faith or the science side. And several years ago, there was a television show on ABC that was really, really popular called Lost. I got into it pretty late. I don't think I started watching it until like the 3rd season. I had to go back and catch up. But I remember at the end of the 2nd season, there was an episode, and it was titled Man of Science, Man of Faith. And it involved kind of like the 2 most dominant characters in the show. One whose name was Jack. He was a doctor. He was hyper-logical, hyper-rational, interpreted the world best through his medical training. And the second was a man named John who had gone through an incredibly miraculous experience where he went from not being able to stand to walk to being miraculously healed. And so his interpretation of the world was shaped so much by this healing experience and the belief in faith. And but I remember watching these 2 characters kind of discuss in this final episode how it is they were able to like maintain their positions, and they were sort of arguing over how easy or difficult it was to have a position of science or faith. And what was interesting is I think the writers did a really good job of capturing how they were both struggling to defend their own beliefs to themselves, that the man of science wanted to believe in faith, but he wasn't sure how to do it. And the man of faith, struggled to deny observable reality, but he felt sort of threatened by opening the door to it. And I think that's something that happens when we talk about faith and science, that if you see yourself as a more spiritual-minded person who is maybe pretty comfortable trusting God with some of the uncertainties in life, I think that one of the fears that you have is that if you open the door just a little bit and let some of like the scientific investigation, those conversations in, you won't know when to stop it. And I think for the scientific-minded people, sometimes we can think through our world so perfectly and like neatly order everything so well that we're a little concerned that if we allow like the mysterious, mystical, spiritual world to move in, we'll lose some of the control, and maybe we won't be able to close the door again. And so what I'd like to do is just spend a couple minutes talking to each of you and offer you some encouragement as you continue down this journey, because the tension between what you believe and the evidence of what you believe is not going away. And it seems like the world is blurring the lines even more and more between science and facts, and then pre-existing ideologies that we're going to use the science to shape, right? So let me speak first to the people of faith. When we wrapped up the sermon, we tried to land in this place where we kind of gave you like this guidance to say, like, listen, whatever science brings your way, don't be afraid of it. You don't have to fear. And I want to make sure that what we didn't mean by that was that you shouldn't push back on science, or that you should just accept everything that's said, because, to not do so is just evidence that you're afraid or insecure. And I don't think that's true, because information that comes at us sometimes does have an agenda. It is sometimes biased. But I think we can acknowledge that like our understanding of the world changes over time, and we don't have to paint ourselves into a corner. We don't have to avoid using the tools of logic and reason that God has given us. So I don't know if you've ever understood the expression paint yourself in a corner, but the idea is if you're painting a room in your house and you start on the wrong corner, you can end up painting yourself into a place that you can't escape from, right? Without walking on the wet paint and making a mess. So when we talk about faith, you don't have to accept everything that comes your way just because some scientific rational minds tell you it's true. But you can also be sure that your faith isn't so fragile that it can't handle any new information. If God is in control, you're going to be just fine. Just remember that it all begins with our experience with God in the Bible as God's revelation. And then we use experience and we use reason and we use tradition to help inform our understanding of the Bible. So you can be confident. You don't have to be afraid. Now, for the people of science, I want to share a couple thoughts with you. And it maybe hovers around like a willingness to like open yourself to the possibility that some of the information you're processing isn't correct. We don't have to believe things just because they're new. And we don't have to believe them just because people who have really great credentials are telling us they're true. We don't have to believe things just because they get through the fact-checked filters on social media. That's these days a pretty low bar. But if you have questions about a world that exists beyond reason and beyond scientific thinking, I think you should acknowledge that those questions are there for a reason. Maybe you don't know if there is a God, but in the same way you wouldn't be able to know that there isn't one. It's just not something that's maybe knowable in that sort of scientific way. But my guess is that you can sense, you can feel that there are parts of you that aren't scientific, that rational thinking doesn't explain, that you have these emotional sensibilities like love, pain at times, sentimentality, fondness, and you don't often know where they come from, what they're born out of. And I'm not trying to say that you have to take the plunge if you're not ready to, but I can promise you that God, if he exists, can walk you through those questions. It might require that you have to stop pretending that you do have it all figured out. In Judaism, rabbis used to talk about how important it was to approach topics with a beginner's mind, as if you don't know anything about it. And maybe in our culture, we've tried to approach topics from like more of like an everyone's an expert. Like we read a few articles online and we see a couple posts on Instagram and we just believe that we have a good understanding of everything. And maybe you can approach topics with a little bit more humility, not because you don't know anything, but because you're willing to admit you're wrong. Well, for everyone, I hope you'll kind of continue your conversation with faith and science and see the beauty of being able to allow both of these things to shape and influence your thinking without affecting your belief in God. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you around.